Okay, so we're going to take the motor cover off and take off the superfluous PCB. There's some little tiny wires here, some thin wires that go to these little inductor thingies down the sides that you just want to clip off so that you can get to the other bits. There you can see that these little short ones. Okay, so take your iron once you've snipped those. Just want to get that nice and warm. Got to be careful now that you don't want to damage your motor's pins because you're going to want them intact. There you go, lift it off. Get rid of the excess solder. It's gone, like that. And then we can just tidy those up. Don't want those. We're not worrying about how much radio interference we make. So you're ready to start making up your connections. You can see I've just got the wiring loom laid in here loosely now. I'll just take that out in a minute so I've got a bit more room. So I don't want that getting in the way for a sec. So, big long red one and the long black one, and those go out through the back here, and the connector will go on the ends of these. And then this is like your master feeds. So these are your master feeds from the battery. Obviously there's red for positive and then black for negative. And this one's going to be made into a three-way join. You're going to have one going to the master switch, and then you're going to have another one, the fire control switch, and then you're going to have another one up here. You're going to take a little spur off this and go into that switch that sits in the other shell half for your master arming switch. So we'll make that in a minute. Now I do mine slightly differently from other people. My little three-way switching, I normally do it with another piece of wire, and I just graft it in. I'll take a little piece over here, and then I'll put some heat shrink over it, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, we're ready to make our first connection, and what we're going to do is we're going to put the long red wire onto the micro switch, and it goes on the center pin, which is normally open. So that's normally open. I'm just going to quickly solder that in place. Once that's in, then we can proceed to the next bit. As you can see, I really ought to buy a helping hands tool. And then what I'll do when that's in a minute, I'll slide on a little bit of heat shrink and just heat shrink that out of the way so that it's nice and tidy. Okay, so down here we've got the two bits of blue wire. We've got the longer one and the shorter one, and we're going to make up the joints now to go to the motor here. And the blue wire goes onto this top part of the motor, and the other red wire goes onto the bottom part of the motor. So if you haven't touched your motor, that's the way around it should work. Now if you get that wrong, it makes your gearbox run backwards. So we're going to do those, and the blue one, back to our micro switch again. The long blue wire goes to the normally closed, and then we're going to make a little three-way join on there, and I'll show you how to do those. Okay, so we've got that joined in now, and that's on the normally closed terminal there of our micro switch. And you can see there are actually little legends written on this micro switch to tell you which one's which, and that's why I do it the way up that I do, because you can read it. And so that will all sit down in there. And if you've got your micro switch positioning right, you should just be able to pop it in there like that, and it shouldn't get in the way. So it's hard to see really with your wiring. If your wiring does get in the way, you've got a little bit of room to play with in here. That's why these two, it's really important to insulate them. So you can see that they're already on, and both pins are covered. And then what I'll do is I'm just going to go and apply some heat to those. And off camera, you can use a lighter, a little hot air gun, one of those gas soldering irons are quite good for that. You've now got the longer of the two blue wires, which is going to go down into here in the grip. This is where you put your MOSFET. You'll have to trim this little block out here in a bit just with a craft knife or some snips or whatever, to allow room for your MOSFET to sit. And the grip is a good place in a Stampede because there's lots of room in there, and you've got space around for other things. And then there's a couple of places on the shell half that you can put your lead. And then this little short piece here, what's going to happen is it's going to come from the motor like that, and then it's going to come down and meet. It's going to come down and meet the switch. Now the BSUK guys, they have their switch at a bit more of an angle, I think, when they do theirs. So they've got a slightly different install method to me. I think they install theirs up the other way, and they put it at a bit more of an angle, and it interfaces slightly differently. So I tend to end up having to go down here and have a three-way joint somewhere down in here. And Mike, if you watch this one, if we could have a longer piece of wire in the kit, just a little bit on the small piece, that'd be great. So I'm going to install that, and I'll show you how to make the joint. The way I make my three-way joins is as follows. I cut a little circle of the insulation out here, and then I'll tin this here with a little bit of solder, And what I do is I'll then attach like this using another pre-tinned piece, and then I'll slide a good big piece of heat shrink over the top of the joint. Now you can see with this joint it's actually going to be really close to the common pin, so we really don't want to make a mistake there with that and have it shorting. So I tend to use a good long length piece of heat shrink, and you can see you've got to slide the heat shrink on before you make the joint, because otherwise when you're this way around and you've made your joint, you can't put heat shrink over here without it fouling it. You can, but you've got to have this end free, and quite often when you make these you don't have both ends free, so just make sure you've got heat shrink there however you do it. So there you can see the three-way splice, and you just slide your heat shrink over like that, and then when you heat shrink that, then you'll have a really nice and neat, tidy heat shrink, which I think makes a big difference in that. I'd rather have that than a messy two-way solder here or anything bulky like that. When you do this, you've got to have the connector out on the outside, and you want to have it this way at 90 degrees. If you go sticking up, it won't shut because there's a tight fit between the motor can and the plastic case. And you don't need to insulate these because they're a long way apart. You're not going to get a short across those. If there's anything wrong, this is why we use such good quality wire. When you're using this really good silicone wire, it's really flexible, and you can see that that's easily going to get pushed down out the way by the shell, and it won't get pinched very easily, unlike the cheaper PVC insulated wire, which is not very flexible and is easy to pinch. So if you're doing this, that's why I just think you should buy the whole kit with the wire, because it's all done there for you and it makes life so much easier and you get a much better quality job. So we can now see that that is starting to take shape quite nicely, and our loom should all fit into the space provided for it, and our switch is kind of nicely sitting up there still and allowing to move and everything. Obviously that position of that switch, you finalise it at the end, but you've marked the ideal position for it, and then you can just wiggle about with this to get it to go in. So then this one can now go back through, and this can go down into the trigger, and it goes underneath, sorry, into the grip, and it goes down underneath here and just wends around there, and then you're going to put your MOSFET in over here. So in a minute I'm going to clean all that out to put the MOSFET in, and then you're also going to have, from there, you're going to have a wire going across to the other shell half, and that will interface with a plug, and that will be for your master arming switch. Okay, so we're looking at the MOSFET. Now when we look at the MOSFET, we've got the mounting piece here, the heatsink. That's like the back, and that's the front for the purposes of our little discussion here. So I'll be holding it like this with the pins facing the top of the screen, so that you can get an idea of what goes where. Now this center pin here is where you're going to have your blue wire, so I'll probably cut a little bit off that center pin. I might cut it down a little bit in a minute. I don't like them being too long and too bendy because I always worry about them getting broken, and that's just going to sit down in there. So center pin blue, and I'll just make that connection and then we'll be good to go. Okay, so I'm just going to make this connection quickly to the center pin. So there we go, there's your blue long wire, and you can see, look, that is gone to the center pin of the MOSFET with the black facing up, and then it splits and you've got one going to the top. I've been working on the other shell half, and I've been positioning the LED, which is supplied with the kit. Now that has to go across the connections on the MOSFET in order for it to work, and what I've done is, there's the standard wiring there for the on-off switch, and I've added one of those microDeans connectors to the end of that. There's both halves of the connector so that you can ensure the polarity is correct all the way through, and then the same with the LED. I soldered wire onto the LED, it's a 5mm hole required, and then the LED now sits just here, just to give a chance to focus. And it's right here. It's protected by the top of the gearbox cover, and it's not too visible, but it's just in front of the arming switch. So you turn the arming switch on, and now that will come on and off when it's off, and that's providing a dual function. It's telling you when the blaster's armed, and it's also working in conjunction with the MOSFET. So we're going to make the connections here at the motor, and we've now got the short piece of red wire, and we're just going to pop that on there again. Make sure you're at 90 degrees. So you want to be there, like that, so that you're clear of the motor housing. Again, a bit of heat shrink. And then this one is going to be our final connection to the trigger. It's the common, so we're going to do that next. So that's on there, and you can see then we've got the micro switch we've got normally closed, which is blue, going to the MOSFET, and also splitting and going to the top connection on the motor. Then we've got the center pin, which is normally open, and in a minute that's going to go back out here, and then we're going to split that one as well. And then we've got the common, which is then going to the positive side of the motor here. Now if you remember on your original colours, this one had a brown stubber wire, that one had a red stubber wire, just in case yours is upside down or is a bit weird.